So how'd it go?
So very well. I think the conversations really are, this is the first state visit to the UK by a sitting president in South Africa for 10 years. The last time this pretty much happened was with Jacob Zuma still at the helm. Of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa has been in power now for about 5 years or so and is about to possibly win re-election at his party conference later this year in December, and then maybe heading off into next year's. You might get relations back on the international front because he'll possibly win re-election as president again. But I think the conversation around this meeting was really around retying the binds that were kind of lost during COVID-19. We had that saga during the Omicron crisis where, of course, there were a few question marks around who could visit where and who couldn't. And so they were retying that up. This was meant to happen before COVID-19, actually, initially, and even before the Queen's passing. But it just so happened that it became the first visit. But there were a few things that were signed. So President Cyril Ramaphosa was touring the Crick Institute, which happens to be the biggest biomedical research facility in Europe. And the key reason for that was because they're organizing partnerships that are based on vaccine manufacturing, genome sequencing, and things like climate change. And if we speak about climate change, of course, we have to focus on the fact that South Africa is part of the continent, Africa, which in itself is only emitting 1% of greenhouse gases, right? And that question mark has always been put forward to South Africa to decarbonize and change because they have carbon as a big part of their electricity matrix. So that has always been a big issue. And of course, we quizzed him about the power situation in the country, which has been the big talking point. And it was very interesting because he said it's kind of like a plane that you have to fix as it goes along, because the problem doesn't stem from just a few years ago. It really, really is historic. In fact, this is actually what he had to say about it.
It's almost like your car. Your car cannot be run forever in a day and years without being serviced, because if you do that, it will break down. So it's the time-based process. You need to stop the car, have it properly serviced, and move, stop it again, have it properly serviced. We didn't have that. And when the decision was then taken to build new power stations, those people who used to be well adept, who had the experience to build power stations within Eskom, they had left because they'd been told that we're not building power stations anymore. The problems of Eskom were seeds that were planted many years ago, rather than in 2014. And because we're dealing with huge, complicated and complex machinery, it's not a one-day fix. It can never be. These are very complex processes.
Protest. Yeah, so for 2014 was when, of course, he was tasked by the previous President Jacob Zuma to actually look after Eskom. That didn't work out as well because 7 years later, Eskom has now still got rolling blackouts in the country. Very interestingly, of course, the situation with Russia and Ukraine, that's also been in key focus. The International Relations Minister, Naledi Pandor, was also on the trip, vehemently said that the West has always tried to have patronizing bullying in trying to get the likes of South Africa to side with Ukraine, and says that it's kind of a situation that they need to sort out on themselves, leaving themselves, of course, in the middle. Interestingly enough, of course, South Africa is part of the BRICS nations, in which Russia is a part and does have a few ties with Russia. So that conversation has always been interesting. But are any of you wine connoisseurs or people
Karen
who love wine?
We've got 10 seconds left.
Right? Well, Karen, this is very interesting. The president says he wants more wine imports.
Imports?
Into the UK.
Oh,
that figure now, we make 25% of the exports into the UK.
I don't mind a nice Rustenburg, I've got to be honest. There's a few others I like as well.
You're up against the Aussie exports, though, in this market. Same category, New World wines.
All right, guys, South Africa, Australia, stop fighting over wines. We'll drink a lot, won't we?
Like a World Cup of wine.
We'll drink a lot. Good to see you, buddy. You coming back on the show later?
Yeah, definitely.
All right, lovely, thanks. Sorry about the early start. Coming up on the show.
Hi, I'm Joanna Bersecci, and thank you for watching. You can check out more of our videos by clicking on the boxes on the screen. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more from CNBC International. Thank you for watching.